Sup everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the thing that everybody just keeps asking me. Walrus, what do you think about Tower Fantasy? Walrus, Tower Fantasy? Genshin Impact? Walrus, are you going to be covering Tower Fantasy? Walrus, have you played Tower Fantasy? Walrus, do you think Tower Fantasy is going to kill Genshin? Or do you think Tower Fantasy is good? It's just non-stop Tower Fantasy. I've been putting it off for weeks and weeks now. It's mostly because I did not participate in the beta of Tower Fantasy. That does not mean I've never seen gameplay of it. I did not participate myself because, to be honest, I had too much on my plate. I was already playing Lost Ark, I'm playing Genshin Impact, and I have actually another game that I'm also playing, just a casual side game as well. So personally, I don't feel like I need another game on my hands, but that being said, I did stay up to date with all of Tower Fantasy's news and update, and honestly, today, I consider at least I can give you my opinion about how Tower of Fantasy may or may not affect Genshin Impact in both positive ways and negative ways. Believe it or not, there's always a good side to everything, but always a bad side too. So if you guys are interested, stay put, let's talk about it. First and foremost, I see the biggest topic of discussion at this point right now is if Tower of Fantasy is going to kill Genshin Impact. And it's the same with every game that comes out, especially every mobile game that comes out that kind of even falls remotely similar into Genshin's category. People want it to be a Genshin killer. And I say this very seriously, actually. People wholeheartedly want Genshin to die. And most of these people that I speak of are ones that are extremely frustrated with Genshin's current game state. And they are the ones who are out here promoting this idea of Genshin killers, or saying things like Tower of Fantasy is so good and it gives us everything that we wanted that Genshin doesn't, and that's why it's going to kill Genshin. But most of the time, these are the same group of people who refuse to acknowledge that Genshin Impact has a solid player base who actually enjoys what Genshin has to offer. And what these people, from my experience, have said that the people who actually enjoys Genshin right now are stupid, are boring, they don't know what a good game is. That's what they call people who enjoys Genshin. So by their standard, anyone who enjoys Genshin right now doesn't know what a good game is, and Tower Fantasy is a good game, and therefore it's going to outperform Genshin. Now, let's just not get into the argument here, right? That's a rabbit hole we don't need to get into, because we're talking about personal and subjective enjoyment of content at this point. Yes, Tower of Fantasy offers a lot more features that Genshin does not. And let me tell you one thing right from the get-go. That is good both for Genshin and for Tower of Fantasy. Because why Tower of Fantasy is designed this way is because they are smart enough to see and fill the market with a product which is of high demand, a game of the quality similar to Genshin. And I do think that Genshin still has a bit more polish to their characters, animation, the game's overall fluidity, as opposed to Tower of Fantasy, but give credit to Tower of Fantasy for achieving a level of realism and just satisfying combat and environment interactions which could rival Genshin. And I think for a lot of people, Tower of Fantasy has been more than enough to satisfy that itch for more combat-focused gameplay with a rich environment and a potentially enticing endgame for players to work towards. Genshin Impact has chosen to ignore the endgame aspect for a particular reason. They want to focus on the casual players. Genshin is a game that wants to have the biggest outreach, so they're developing their game horizontally. And for players who are here for one aspect of Genshin, that's going to be a horrible experience, because let's say if you are here just to play one aspect of Genshin, like endgame or some sort of competitive game mode, Genshin is an atrocity of a game for you to pick up, because not only does the game not have any of those developed features, the developers actively show us they don't want to develop the game towards that direction. They actively continue to push out horizontal content, and they put limited time banners for you to play around summoning for their exclusive units, as opposed to taking what you already have and exploring the world and game. Now, there's not enough time in this video for us to sit here and talk about HoYoverse's business model, and in fact, I've talked about it in the past, so if you're interested, go check those videos out. But what I'm saying is, from what I have seen, Tower of Fantasy has taken what Genshin refuses to develop and developed developed it for their own game. So this is when we have to talk about why this benefits both. All right, Genshin Impact, let's be honest here, has way overshot its potential. The game was never meant to be as popular as it is. And I think HoYoverse has even came out and said that, we never expected for this kind of success. And to a degree, I don't think they're able to manage it. It's been proven over a year now that Genshin just cannot keep up with the demands of the player base. And if they try to, they're going to be forsaking their original vision for the game, which is a more casual, daily 30 minutes type of game for you to enjoy and to collect these characters. And I'm gonna be honest, I think that HoYoverse, when it comes to promoting their game, they don't promote it the same way they're wanting to develop it. And yes, I've talked about this in the past as well, where I said HoYoverse is not really truthful to themselves even when they talk about their game. Of course, they want the game to develop into this rich and fantastical world where people can spend a lot of time in it or choose to spend less time in it. But right now, the game is just FOMO reskinned as 2D waifus and husbandos. If you want to get that endgame itch satisfied, you have to play a game that's focused more on vertical development. Genshin is not. It's a horizontal developed game, which could potentially in the future develop vertically, but we don't know that. No one knows that. HoYoverse refused to comment on it, and I think a lot of people also feel frustrated with the slow progression of their characters due to the gating of resin. And I've seen in Tower of Fantasy that there are game modes where you are not reliant on some sort of resin-like system, so you could play the game for a longer period of time. If you want to sink more hours into it, you could. And I think having that option is important for most players. At the same time, Genshin feels very cheap with their resources. They don't want to give you any more additional resin. They don't want to give you too many primo gems. They want to make sure that the only product that they can keep selling to you, which is their characters, remains exclusive and enticing enough for you to continue wanting to log into the game, partake in events, and grind those hours away. Recently, this FOMO business model has really taken a hit, especially with the extension of the Ayaka banner. At this point, we're not going to be seeing Ayaka for a long time along with her weapon, but it's safe to say that the FOMO is starting to wear off on some people, especially if you've beaten the game, or if you've beaten the game in many different ways, especially if you already 36-star the Abyss multiple times. These type of players start to feel less and less enticed to continue summoning, continue building and grinding resin, primo gems, whatnot, because there's no goal anymore. And I think in a way, Tower of Fantasy is hyped by many for the wrong reason. A lot of people want Tower of Fantasy to succeed just so they can shove it in Genshin players' faces. That type of excitement and hype for a game never lasts. You have to be truly excited for the features that the game has to offer, as opposed to lording it over another community based on its success. I think that's two separate things. Because trust me when I say that there's going to be a large wave of people who plays Tower of Fantasy just so they can spite Genshin developers in some way. They want to make Tower of Fantasy as successful as they can just to prove to the Genshin developers that there is competition out there and that Genshin died because of their reluctancy and complacency. But the second they achieve that goal, they're going to drop Tower of Fantasy faster than you see your primo gems being burned on a waifu banner. The true hype and excitement really only sticks when you yourself believe in what the game has to offer and the contents that it holds. So people, make sure to check out Tower of Fantasy if the game truly interests you, and be truthful to yourself, because it's only going to hurt both parties in the long run. Both Tower Fantasy is going to see a huge drop in player base, along with Genshin Impact, who sees people jumping ships. And eventually, if the hype dies down in Tower Fantasy and it doesn't really work out, guess what? They likely will come back to Genshin. So for the people who's like, oh, take that Genshin Impact, you're not really achieving your goal if you drop the game immediately afterwards as well. Make sure Tower Fantasy makes enough noise and splash in the community. I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm saying it's great that we're introducing another competitor in the market space, but make sure this competitor has enough support from the community to succeed and to really pose a threat to Genshin, so HoYoverse can move some weight and push out good content for us. Alright, that's all I have to say about this. And to be honest, I am slightly excited for its official release. I definitely definitely will check it out by then, and possibly even post content on it. And who knows, I might enjoy it. I might enjoy it more than Genshin. Will I be jumping ships and make Tower Fantasy content? We will have to see, right? I'm not sitting here telling you or making any promises saying I'm a jumping ship immediately. I'm confident that in future time there will be a game that comes out which makes me more excited to play it than Genshin Impact. But right now, Genshin, I'm excited for new possibilities, especially with Dendro right around the corner. I have to wait and at least experience that and Sumeru, right? So until next time, urge y'all to stay safe and peace.